My mother dumped an entire plate of food on my 9-year-old son during New Year's Eve dinner and told us to leave. "Get out and never come back," my brother said. Dad just sat there staring with that same silent contempt he always had. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I simply looked around the table and said, "Then you won't mind if I do this. I'm Veronica, a single mom who spent years trying to be enough for a family that never really saw me. My son Liam, 9 years old, is everything left after my husband died." That night, everything exploded in seconds. What I did next made the entire room go dead silent. If you've ever been hurt by the people who are supposed to love you most, especially in front of your own child, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around till the end. You're going to want to see what happened when the real consequences finally landed. To understand why that night became the breaking point, I need to go back to the beginning. I was always the shadow in our family. Brandon, my younger brother, was the light everyone turned to. On his 10th birthday, the living room overflowed with balloons, a towering 3-tier cake, and stacks of brightly wrapped gifts: new sneakers, a video game console, even a shiny new bicycle. Relatives gathered around, laughing and applauding as he ripped open each package. I stood quietly in the corner, holding a large trash bag, waiting to collect the scattered wrapping paper, while everyone hugged him and snapped photos. No one seemed to remember that I had turned 11 the month before, and my own birthday had passed with just a card and a quick happy birthday over breakfast. School report cards followed the same pattern. Brandon's straight A's were proudly displayed on the refrigerator door, and Mom would call aunts and uncles to brag about his grades like they were national achievements. My own report cards were strong, mostly A's with a handful of B's, but the conversation always shifted back to him. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Mom would ask, not in anger, but as if it were a simple, obvious truth. I would lower my head, swallow the lump in my throat, and silently promise myself to try harder next time. Dad never intervened. Whenever I tried to speak up about feeling invisible, about the endless comparisons, he would let out a long, heavy sigh, glance at the floor, and change the subject. His silence wasn't mean. It was worse. It was permission. It told me my feelings weren't important enough to disturb the peace. I grew up learning to stay quiet to be loved. Years passed. I moved out, went to college, found a steady job. Then I met Michael. He was calm, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened without immediately trying to solve everything. We married in a small ceremony my parents attended, smiled for the photos, but the real warmth was between us. Michael worked in logistics, putting in long hours but earning solid pay. We bought a modest house, welcomed Liam into the world, and built a quiet, stable life together. Even after leaving home, the financial support continued. Every month, without exception, I transferred $200 to $500 to my parents' account. Sometimes it covered a car repair, sometimes a utility bill, sometimes it just eased the pressure of unexpected expenses. I never told anyone. I didn't post about it on social media, didn't ask for recognition. I told myself this was simply what family did. They never thanked me, not in a way that felt genuine. Mom would mention it casually, as if, "We got that check again," like it was something automatic. Brandon would joke that I was the family ATM. Lisa, his wife, would smile and nod along. Dad would deposit the money without a word. I kept sending it anyway. It was easier than confrontation, easier than admitting the painful truth that I was still auditioning for a role I would never truly earn. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything stopped. I was at work when the phone rang. A police officer, calm but careful with his words. Michael had been in a car accident on the highway. A truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel, crossed the center line, and hit him head-on. He didn't survive long enough to reach the hospital. The world went strangely quiet after that. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, phone still pressed to my ear, Liam playing in the next room, completely unaware. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at the wall, trying to comprehend how an ordinary morning could end this way. The funeral was small and subdued. My parents came. Mom gave me a brief hug and said she was sorry. Dad stood toward the back, hands in his pockets. Brandon and Lisa sent flowers. No one stayed long. After the funeral, grief slowly gave way to the harsh pull of reality. The days turned into weeks of endless paperwork, phone calls, and waiting. The insurance company moved at a glacial pace, citing the need for further investigation into the accident details. I spent hours on hold sending emails to adjusters, gathering police reports, medical records, and employment history I barely remembered compiling. Each delay felt like another small wound. I couldn't carry the weight alone anymore, so I hired a claims specialist, a calm woman named Ellen, who knew exactly which forms to push and which questions to ask. She handled the back and forth, the follow-ups, the negotiations. I just signed where she told me to and tried to keep breathing. Then one ordinary morning, the funds cleared. $3 million appeared in the account. The number stared back at me from the screen, cold and final. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee gone cold, Liam still asleep in his room. No rush of joy came. No sense of victory. Just the heavy realization that life had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. That night, after Liam was in bed, I opened the banking app again. I stared at the balance for a long time. I thought about all the years I had quietly sent money, small amounts that added up to years of silent support. I thought about how those transfers were accepted without question, how they became expected rather than appreciated. I thought about the way conversations shifted when the money slowed, how the tone changed from casual to careful. I asked myself the question that had been circling for weeks. If I don't give them this chance, will I carry the guilt forever? The thought sat heavy in my chest. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove I belonged, trying to earn a place at the table. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for Liam. I didn't want him growing up in a family where love had to be purchased with money. I wanted to believe just once that they could see me as more than a burden, as someone who could give without being reminded of what I lacked. So I made the decision. I would use $600,000 to help them. The largest portion would go to Mom and Dad, enough to pay off the mortgage completely and clear the credit card debt that had accumulated over the years. The remaining amount would go to Brandon, a solid foundation for the business he had talked about starting for so long. I told myself this could be the moment everything changed. Maybe this would show them I wasn't just the one who needed help. I was the one who could offer it freely. I opened the banking app and began setting up the transfers. I created 3 separate pending transactions, each labeled clearly: one for my parents' mortgage payoff, one for their remaining debts, and one for Brandon's startup capital. I didn't rush. I double-checked the amounts, the account numbers, the memos. Everything had to be precise. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wanted it to be a surprise, something I could reveal during New Year's Eve dinner. I imagined the moment, the table quiet, the countdown to midnight playing softly in the background, me explaining calmly that this was my way of saying we could start fresh. I pictured Mom's expression softening, Dad giving a small nod of acknowledgement, Brandon looking at me with something close to respect. I let myself hold on to that image, fragile as it was. I saved the transactions as pending. They wouldn't process until I hit confirm, which gave me time to think, to breathe. I closed the app and sat in the dark living room, the house quiet around me. Outside, the winter night was still. I didn't know then how dangerous hope could be. New Year's Eve arrived, and I walked into that house with the last fragile thread of hope I had left. The dining room glowed with warm light from strings of white bulbs draped across the windows. The TV in the living room played the pre-countdown show, commentators laughing about the ball drop in Times Square. The long table was covered with Mom's best white tablecloth, set with her good china silverware, and platters of roast beef, creamy mashed potatoes, green beans, almondine, fresh rolls still warm from the oven, and a bowl of cranberry sauce. Candles flickered in the center, casting soft shadows. The room smelled like pine from the small tree in the corner, and the food Mom had spent all day preparing. Everyone was there, Mom moving between the kitchen and table adjusting plates. Dad seated at the head, Brandon and Lisa on one side, Liam and I on the other. Laughter drifted through the air, glasses clinking as people toasted to the year ahead. For the first few minutes it felt almost normal. Liam sat beside me, eyes bright at the decorations, quietly taking small bites of his roll. I smiled at him, squeezed his hand under the table. The conversation flowed lightly at first: work updates, neighborhood news, the weather. Mom passed the potatoes with a smile. Brandon told a joke about the football game earlier that day. Lisa complimented the food. I let myself relax a fraction, thinking perhaps tonight could be different, that the small gestures of kindness might mean something. Then the comments began, subtle at first, the way they always were. Mom looked across the table at me, her smile thin. "Veronica, you look tired. Still adjusting, I suppose. Being a widow is hard." The word widow landed like a quiet slap. I nodded, kept my voice steady. "I'm managing." She tilted her head slightly. "You always say that. But you know life goes on. You have to get your act together for Liam's sake." Brandon chuckled, leaning back in his chair, fork in hand. "Yeah, sis, you've been in that phase for a while now. Maybe it's time to move on." Lisa nodded along, adding softly, "It's not healthy to stay stuck." The words weren't shouted. They were delivered casually, almost kindly, the kind of passive jabs that had been part of every family gathering for years. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the old instinct to shrink, but I swallowed it down. I told myself to let it go. For Liam. The conversation shifted to him. Mom glanced at Liam, who was quietly cutting his meat. "He's so quiet. Doesn't talk much, does he? Not like Brandon's kids, they're always full of energy." Brandon laughed lightly. "Yeah, Liam's a little reserved. Needs to come out of his shell." Lisa smiled. "Kids pick up on things. Maybe he senses the tension." The air in the room thickened. I felt Liam shift beside me, his fork pausing mid-motion. I put my hand gently on his arm. "He's fine. He's just eating." But Mom wasn't finished. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. "You know, Veronica, if you were more like your brother, maybe things would be easier. Brandon has a plan, a future. You're still figuring it out." That was the moment everything shattered. Mom's face flushed red, her lips pressed into a tight line. She reached across the table for Liam's plate, his half-eaten roast beef and potatoes, and in one sharp, deliberate motion she turned it over. The food slid slowly down the front of his shirt, gravy dripping in thick trails, potatoes clinging to his chest, bits of green beans tumbling into his lap. The movement was not rushed. It was slow, almost calculated. The room went utterly still. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft plop of food hitting fabric, the faint drip of gravy onto the tablecloth, and the distant murmur of the TV countdown in the background. Liam froze, eyes wide, hands hovering above the mess. I felt his small body tense beside me, his breath catch. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating, everyone watching, no one breathing. Brandon broke it first. He stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. His voice was cold, final. "Get out, both of you, and don't ever come back." Dad sat motionless at the head of the table, eyes fixed on his plate, hands folded in his lap. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. He just sat there, as he always had. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at Liam, saw the shock and hurt in his eyes, the food still clinging to him, gravy soaking through his shirt. Then I looked at them. Mom, Brandon, Lisa, Dad, all of them frozen in their places. The room thick with the weight of what had just happened. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the banking app. My thumb moved slowly, deliberately across the screen. One by one, I selected the pending transfers, the mortgage payoff, the debt clearance, the startup fund. $600,000 in total. I tapped cancel on each one. The soft, unmistakable click of confirmation echoed in the dead silence of the room. The sound was small, digital, almost insignificant. But in that moment, it was the loudest thing in the world. 3 clicks. 3 transactions voided. The air in the room seemed to vanish. No one said a word. The only sounds left were that tiny click repeating 3 times and the faint, distant hum of the TV counting down to midnight. I put the phone back in my pocket. I stood up, took Liam's hand, and led him out of the room without another word. The door closed behind us and the night swallowed us whole. The moment I pressed the final button, the room shattered. Mom was the first to react. She bolted from her chair so fast the legs scraped harshly against the hardwood floor. "Veronica," she called, her voice cracking with panic. "What did you just do?" She hurried after us as I guided Liam toward the front door, her footsteps quick and uneven, almost stumbling. Brandon followed right behind Lisa, trailing him, while Dad remained frozen at the head of the table, still staring at his plate. The front door was only a few steps away, but every step felt like crossing an invisible line I could never uncross. Mom reached us first, her hand grabbing my arm. "You can't do this. You can't just cancel everything." Her voice rose desperate and high. "How could you do this to me? Your own mother?" I was just angry. The words tumbled out in a rush, the only thing she could manage to say in that moment. I didn't respond. I pulled my arm free gently but firmly, kept walking forward, Liam's hand tight in mine. Brandon pushed past her, blocking the doorway. "Wait. You don't understand. This is crazy. You're ruining everything." His face was flushed, eyes wide with something between anger and fear. Lisa stood behind him, hands clasped tightly, saying nothing, just watching with wide eyes. I looked at them. Mom pleading, Brandon furious, Dad still in the dining room not moving, and I felt something inside me finally settle. There was no anger left. Just clarity. Just finality. I stepped around. Brandon opened the front door and led Liam outside. The cold night air hit us immediately, sharp and biting. Liam's shirt was still stained gravy, drying in dark patches across his chest. I didn't stop to clean it. I just kept walking to the car, opened the back door, helped him in. He sat silently staring at his lap. I buckled him in, closed the door, and got behind the wheel. The engine started with a low, steady hum. I pulled out of the driveway without looking back. The house lights fading in the rearview mirror. We drove in silence for several minutes. The streets were quiet, holiday lights twinkling on houses, the occasional firework popping in the distance. I found the nearest decent hotel, a mid-range chain just off the highway, clean, safe, with a bright lobby and a 24-hour front desk. I parked, took Liam's hand, and we walked inside. The clerk smiled warmly at him, asked if he wanted a cookie from the jar on the counter. Liam shook his head, staying close to me. I checked us in, paid with my card, and took the key card to a room with 2 queen beds. Once inside, I turned on the light. The room was simple and clean. White walls, a small desk, a TV mounted on the wall. 2 beds with crisp white sheets. Liam stood in the middle of the room, still in his stained shirt, looking small and lost. I knelt in front of him, met his eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He looked at me, eyes big and uncertain. "Mom? Do they really not like me?" I took both his hands in mine. "No, sweetheart. It's not that you're not lovable. It's that they don't know how to love properly. And that's not your fault. Never your fault. I'm going to protect you from that always. Forever." He nodded slowly, then leaned into me. I wrapped my arms around him and held him tight. I could feel his small heartbeat against my chest, fast but steadying. I kissed the top of his head. "We're going to be okay. I promise you that." I helped him out of the dirty shirt, gave him one of my clean t-shirts to sleep in. It was big on him, but he didn't mind. He climbed into bed exhausted. I sat beside him, rubbing his back until his breathing evened out and he fell asleep. Then I moved to the other bed, sat on the edge, and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I looked at the screen. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Brandon. Again. Mom. I turned it on silent, but the screen kept lighting up over and over. Finally, I answered the third call from Mom. Veronica, please. She started, voice thick with tears. Come back. We didn't mean it. It was just... Emotions were high. It's New Year's. Let's talk. Please. I stayed quiet. Brandon's voice came on the line. He must have taken the phone from her. You can't do this. You're being dramatic. Come back, we'll fix it. The money? You can redo it. Just come home. I looked at Liam sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. No, I said quietly. Not tonight. Not after what happened. Mom took the phone back. Please, Veronica. We're family. I ended the call. The room was silent again, except for Liam's soft, even breathing. I turned off the light, lay down beside him, and stared at the ceiling until the first light of the new year crept through the curtains. 3 days of silence passed, and then the real storm arrived from social media. It started with Brandon's post on Facebook. I saw it on the third morning while Liam was eating breakfast. The photo was of the empty dining room table from New Year's Eve, the decorations still up, the candles burned down to stubs. The caption was long and cutting. Some people show their true colors when you finally set boundaries. My sister showed up expecting sympathy, and when we said no more, she tried to ruin our family with money. Kept it all for herself after getting lucky from her husband's accident. Ungrateful. Selfish. Some family you can't trust. He didn't tag me directly, but he didn't need to. Everyone in our circle knew exactly who he meant. Likes and comments poured in from relatives, neighbors, old friends, prayers for Mom and Dad, hearts for Brandon, words like disgrace and entitled and shameful. I stared at the screen for a long time. Liam looked up from his cereal bowl. What's wrong, Mom? I closed the app, smiled at him. Nothing important, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast. I didn't respond right away. I waited until Liam was at school, then I opened my own account. I uploaded screenshots, years of monthly transfers to my parents' account, dates, amounts, memos like for utilities or car repair. I included one from Mom's old post, the one where she had shared a photo of a small check she sent me after Michael died, captioning it, "Sometimes you have to step up for family even when it's hard. Praying Veronica learns to stand on her own soon." I added a simple caption of my own. This is what family looked like before. Quiet help, no fanfare. This is what happened when I needed it once. And for the record, I didn't storm out. I left when I was told New Year's was better without me and my son. I hit post. Then I turned off notifications and went about my day, laundry, groceries, picking Liam up from school. I didn't check until evening. The backlash came fast. Within an hour, the comments on Brandon's post shifted. Wait, you were taking money from her every month? Why did you post about helping her like it was charity? So you kicked her out, and now you're mad. She won't give you more relatives. I hadn't spoken to in years. Started messaging me privately, some apologizing, some asking for my side. Brandon's post was edited twice, then deleted entirely. The photo disappeared. The comments vanished. The thread was gone. By evening, my phone was blowing up again. Texts from aunts, cousins, old friends. Mom called 3 times. I didn't answer. Then the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Mom and Dad stood on the porch, Brandon and Lisa behind them. Mom held a bakery box, probably cake or cookies, some kind of peace offering. Dad looked tired, hands in his coat pockets. Brandon's face was tight, arms crossed. I didn't open the door. I stood there watching them. Mom knocked again, softer this time. Veronica, honey, please. We just want to talk. Her voice trembled through the wood. Dad cleared his throat. We're sorry. Let us in. I stayed silent. Liam was in the living room coloring at the coffee table. He looked up. "Who is it, Mom?" I smiled at him. "Just some people." "Stay there." "Okay." Brandon stepped forward. "Come on, Veronica. This is ridiculous. We're family. Open the door." I looked at them through the glass. Mom with her hopeful eyes, Dad with his quiet regret, Brandon with his anger barely hidden, Lisa silent beside him. I thought about the years I spent trying to earn their love, the money I sent without asking for thanks, the way they accepted it all as their due. I thought about Liam, the way he looked at me in the hotel asking if they really didn't like him. I turned away from the door. I walked back to Liam, sat beside him on the couch, and watched him color. The doorbell rang again, softer, then stopped. Footsteps retreated down the porch steps. A car engine started. They drove away. I didn't open the door. I didn't call them back. That was the last time they came to my house. 10 months later, everything had changed completely. The house I grew up in was sold. A for sale sign went up in the front yard 3 months after that night, photos online showing the familiar living room staged with neutral furniture and fresh flowers. It sold for less than they owed underwater mortgage, the realtor explained in the listing notes. They moved to a small rental apartment in a complex across town, 2 bedrooms, linoleum floors, no yard, shared laundry in the basement. Mom took a part-time job at a local grocery store, stocking shelves in the evenings, her hands aching from years of not working. Dad picked up shifts driving for a rideshare app late nights, ferrying strangers, his back hurting more each day. They were in their late 60s, retirement age for most, but the debt didn't care. Credit cards maxed from years of living beyond means, medical bills piling up from stress-related doctor visits, no cushion left. Friends from church whispered about it. Times are tough, they'd say, but everyone knew the truth. They had relied on the monthly support for so long that when it stopped, the foundation cracked. Brandon's business dream fell apart. The startup he planned, a small coffee shop franchise, never got off the ground. Investors backed out when he couldn't show stable funding. The bank denied the loan without collateral. Lisa went back to full-time work at her office job, longer hours to cover rent and groceries. Brandon bounced between temp gigs, warehouse loading delivery, driving occasional construction help, nothing steady, nothing with benefits. They argued more from what I heard through mutual contacts. No more posts about family first or dream chases. Just silence on social media, occasional check-ins from old friends asking if they were okay. They sold the second car, downsized to 1 vehicle. The apartment was cramped, no room for guests. They stopped hosting holidays. I heard the details in bits through a cousin who messaged me once, an aunt who called to check in, a neighbor who mentioned it casually. "They're struggling," she said. "Really struggling." I listened, nodded on my end, but didn't offer help. The calls stopped after a while. No one blamed me openly anymore. The narrative had flipped quietly. People stopped asking why I wasn't there. They started asking why the family hadn't held on tighter. Meanwhile, my life steadied in ways I hadn't expected. With the settlement money, I put a down payment on a small house in a quiet suburb, 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard, nothing flashy but solid brick, and a roof that didn't leak. No mortgage hanging over us. The neighborhood was family-friendly, kids riding bikes after school, parks nearby with playgrounds. Liam had his own room now, walls painted blue, a desk for homework, a shelf for his books and models. I set up a college fund for him, invested conservatively in index funds and bonds, enough to cover tuition at a state school, without loans. An emergency fund too, 6 months of living expenses in a high-yield savings account. I worked my job, steady hours, no overtime needed. We got a dog, a rescue lab mix named Max, who greeted Liam every day with wagging tail and sloppy kisses. Mornings were routine now. Liam to school, me to work, evenings with homework and dinner. He laughed more, invited a friend over for video games. No questions about grandparents. No hesitation when I picked him up. The grief for Michael still came in waves. Anniversaries, quiet nights. But it wasn't tangled with fear anymore. We were safe. Secure. No one could take that away. The old house was full of people, but never safe. The new house was smaller but peaceful, filled only with real love. Liam started soccer. His first game, he scored a goal, ran to the sidelines, hugging me. "Did you see Mom?" "I did." I cheered louder than anyone. Friends from work came over for a barbecue, real friends, the kind who asked about us, not our drama. No blood ties required. They brought potato salad, and stories stayed late laughing on the patio. Liam played with their kids in the yard. Max chased a ball. It was simple. It was ours. I blocked their numbers months ago. No texts, no calls, no holidays. Liam asked once early on, "Will we see Grandma and Grandpa again?" I hugged him. "Only if they learn to treat you right. Until then, we have our family." He nodded, accepted it. Kids heal fast when they're protected. Through the grapevine, I learned more about their unraveling. Mom's health declined, stress-related, doctor said. High blood pressure, sleep issues, a prescription for anxiety she never filled. Dad's rideshare ratings dropped, complaints about grumpiness. He stopped driving at night. Brandon and Lisa, separated, briefly reconciled, but tension lingered. The coffee shop idea died completely, no loan approval without collateral. They rented a smaller place, sold the second car. Retirement vanished. Social Security wouldn't cover it all. They ate simple meals, cut subscriptions, canceled cable. The apartment smelled of cheap air freshener and regret. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I didn't regret. What haunted them wasn't the money lost. It was knowing how close it had been. $600,000 right there, ready to change everything. One night erased it. They replayed it in conversations I heard. If only we'd waited. She was going to help. We pushed too far. The regret was heavier than any debt. The grief for the family I wanted lingered sometimes. Holidays alone felt empty at first. Birthdays without cards. But Liam's smile filled it. Friends became family. Safety over approval. Peace over performance. Protecting your child from a toxic family matters more than any acceptance from blood relatives. Real family respects boundaries, lifts you up, doesn't demand what isn't theirs. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Loyalty earns its place. Love doesn't require payment. It doesn't punish. It doesn't withhold. We built something new, not perfect, but ours. Liam grew taller, laughed louder, slept soundly. Max barked at squirrels. The yard filled with summer evenings and fireflies. I didn't look back. Have you ever had to choose between your family's approval and your child's peace? Share below.